Hi, my name is Maribel, and the last time I sat at my mother's dinner table, she hurled a pot of boiling soup across my face and said, "Give Sable everything you own, or get out." I walked out that night with nothing but a bag of clothes, and the napkin my father once stitched for me. I thought I was losing a family. What I didn't know was that I was about to uncover forged signatures, stolen titles, and the kind of betrayal you only expect from strangers, not your own blood. When I confronted them with the truth, my mother leaned back, smirked, and whispered, "You'll regret dragging us through the mud." But what happens when the daughter they tried to erase shows up with proof that cannot be silenced? Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We share new stories every single day. Hit like, and let us know what city you're watching from in the comments. They say mornings tell the mood of a house, that if you wake up tense, it's because something's already wrong. That Tuesday, I opened my eyes before the sun had fully claimed the kitchen. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy and pressing. I padded downstairs in my socks, the old wood cool beneath my heels. The house still smelled faintly of lemon oil and last night's garlic bread. I had scrubbed the counters twice. Not for hygiene, just to keep myself moving. I cracked the window, let in a sliver of suburban Sacramento's morning chill, and started the kettle. I didn't touch the coffee machine. That was always Constance's territory. As the toast popped, I reminded myself Sable was coming again. My mother's stepdaughter. My father had passed before she arrived. She wasn't blood, but you'd never know that from how Constance treated her. The praise, the babying, the our girl tone in her voice. I'd tried not to let it get to me, but the past few months, it had become unbearable. Still, I buttered toast, made oatmeal, and even warmed leftover soup from the night before, Constance's favorite. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just avoid another eruption. Constance came down around Chinjio, housecoat dragging, eyes sharp behind her glasses. She didn't say good morning. Just sat, spooned oatmeal into her bowl, and sipped loudly. I waited. The pause was too long. She was working herself up. Finally, she looked at me. Her voice was sweet, but the kind of sweet you only hear right before poison hits your gut. "Sable's stopping by around Moijo. She's having such a hard time lately," Constance said, as if I didn't know. I nodded once, neutral, non-committal. She continued, tone dipping into business. "She'll need your car today, and your card, just until she gets settled with work." My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. "I'm sorry? You don't use the car during the week. You work remote now. And the card? It's time you did something useful. She's family too, you know." I swallowed. Not the oatmeal. My anger. "No," I said gently. "I'm not giving her my car or my card. I've helped enough." Constance's eyes narrowed like I had just spat in her cereal. "You think you're better than her? With your online job and fancy notebooks? This is about family. She's trying. You're hoarding." I kept my voice level. "I'm not hoarding. I'm surviving. And I've given this family more than you remember." She stood. "She'll be here soon," she snapped. "Give her all your things or get out." And just like that, I knew this wasn't a conversation. It was a command. I didn't respond, just turned off the stove. Then came the sound of the soup pot scraping against the burner. I turned, too late. The soup, still hot, arced through the air like a scalding wave. It hit my cheek, soaked my blouse, burned into my shoulder. But what stung more wasn't the heat. It was the clarity. She threw soup at me. Her daughter wasn't even here yet, and Constance had chosen her. Violently. I didn't scream, didn't flinch. I simply stood there, soup dripping from my collar. I stared at the woman who had given birth to me, who now glared like I was trespassing in a house I helped pay off. I remembered when the deed changed hands last year. Constance said she was simplifying the paperwork. I hadn't argued. I thought stupidly that peace was worth the cost. Apparently, peace meant surrender. I walked upstairs slowly, wet, silent. In my room, I took the small bag I used for overnights, packed only what was mine, truly mine. A pair of jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. There, tucked under old birthday cards, was the cloth napkin my father Harold embroidered when I turned 15. I see you. His handwriting, his stitching. I folded it carefully, placed it at the very top. No yelling, no note, no farewell. Downstairs I heard the garage door creak open. Sable's SUV, timing poetic and cruel. I didn't wait to see her. I didn't want to hear her, "Oh no, what happened here?" in that false, sugary voice. I walked past the kitchen. Constance didn't follow. Maybe she thought I'd return. Maybe she thought shame would pull me back like it always had. I reached the front door. Soup clung to my blouse, but my back was straight. I held my car key tight and walked to the curb. The wind had picked up. It felt clean and bracing. I opened the door, sat, turned the key, and I didn't look back. I didn't call anyone. I just kept driving. Around corners I didn't recognize. Past intersections I normally rolled through without thought. But today, none of it felt familiar. The silence in the car was thick. Even the engine sounded like it was holding its breath. My hand stayed at 10 and 2, like some first-time driver on her test. I wasn't sure if it was the soup drying on my chest, or the words echoing louder now than when she'd first spoken them. Give her all your things or get out now. No trembling, no tears, just a steady emptiness settling somewhere deep in my stomach. I didn't know where I was headed. I just knew I couldn't go back. An hour later, I pulled into a small cafe on the edge of a strip mall, one of those places that serves burnt coffee but has free Wi-Fi, and nobody bothers you if you sit too long. I didn't go in. I sat in my car, engine off, watching the reflection of myself in the rearview mirror. The soup stain had turned stiff, dried against my collarbone. My face was still blotchy. Not from crying, just from heat and disbelief. How did I become the outsider in my own life? The last time I felt like this, I'd been standing in the back aisle of our family's grocery store just 4 weeks ago. It was a Thursday. I was restocking shelves in the canned goods section when I heard the jingle of heels and exaggerated laughter coming down the main aisle. Sable, her voice always carried, like it belonged to someone used to being overheard. She wore a blouse too white for a grocery store, and heels too high for walking, let alone managing. Constance followed behind her, with the pride of a mother escorting her daughter to prom. "Everyone meet our new store manager, Sable Whitlock," Constance announced, like we were at a press conference, not next to a discount bin of lentils. No one looked at me, not even Sable. Not really. She just smiled that practiced tight-lipped grin of hers, then walked right into the back office like she'd been working there for years. I waited. I waited for Constance to look at me, to say something, anything. Instead, she patted my shoulder and whispered, "Take some real time off, sweetie. You've been running yourself far too thin. Let Sable handle things now." I wasn't fired. I wasn't demoted. I was erased. Back in the car, I pulled my phone from the console and opened the family Facebook group. New notification: Hensley, Legacy, Women of Strength, album, uploaded by Constance. I clicked. Photo after photo. Sable smiling, Sable organizing, Sable leading morning staff meetings in the break room I used to unlock every day at 6:30 a.m. There was a photo of the Thanksgiving display I had designed last year. Cornucopia, twinkle lights, seasonal color palette, the whole thing. Caption read, "Sable's very first fall installation. Truly brilliant work." I stared at it so long I forgot to breathe. My thumb trembled as I scrolled further. Then I stopped. One photo caught my eye. A family dinner, our dining room table, my serving bowls, the menu I had prepared, down to the wine pairing, and the caption, "Beautiful evening hosted entirely by Sable for the whole family. Her warmth and grace bring us together." It felt like someone had dug their hand inside my chest and rearranged the truth. I wasn't even in the frame. And yet it was my food, my candles, my home. I set the phone down. The screen stayed lit for a second longer before fading to black. I didn't even know where I was driving until the old sign came into view. Hensley Market, since 1973. My father, Harold, opened that store with one freezer and a dream. After his stroke, I turned it around, rebranded it, grew it, made it matter again. Now stretched across the front windows was a new banner, founded by Constance and Sable Whitlock. I parked across the lot, didn't get out. Inside, I could see a teenage cashier folding paper bags. A few regulars strolled the aisles. I knew every shelf in that place, every creak in the floorboards, every staff birthday. My father once told me, not long before he passed, "Keep the ledger safe. Someday it'll matter more than you think." I kept it. The original paper ledger, tucked away in a storage box under my bed. His handwriting. Every early sale, every inventory slip, every check signed by him, long before Sable even entered our lives, and now his name wasn't even on the front window. That night, after circling a few more blocks to clear my head, I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there for a long time. Before I sent the message to Ivy, my old co-worker, the only one who'd ever said what I never dared say aloud. "Me. I think it's time." She responded almost instantly. "Maribel, I always knew they were pushing you out. I saved something important for you. Come by soon." That was all she wrote, but it was more than enough. I typed her address into the GPS. She lived maybe 15 minutes away. I turned the ignition, pulled out onto the road, and let the soft glow of the street lamps guide me towards something that finally resembled direction. As I stopped at a red light, something shifted in the trunk behind me. I didn't have much with me, just that one box, but I heard the corner of something slide. In the rear view mirror, I caught the edge of it peeking out. The napkin. "I see you," it whispered again. I smiled, not with joy, but with clarity. "Let's see just how much history they've rewritten," I murmured. Ivy didn't say anything at first. She just stood in the doorway, eyes filled with something heavier than sympathy. She held out a manila envelope. "I didn't know who else to trust with this, Maribel," she said. "I've had it waiting for a while now." I stepped inside slowly, my legs stiff from the long drive, and my thoughts more tangled than ever. Her home smelled like lemon oil and cedar, clean and grounded. I hadn't realized how much I missed that feeling. I opened the envelope right there in her foyer. Inside was a copy of a document I'd never seen before. It looked official, notarized. My name was printed at the bottom, followed by what was supposed to be my signature. Asset Consolidation Transfer Agreement, the title read. According to this paper, I had signed over my stake in the grocery store to Constance. The date, just 1 month before Sable strolled in with her clipboard and fake smile. "That's not my signature," I whispered. My voice sounded too small for the walls around us. Ivy nodded. "I figured as much, Maribel." I watched Sable hand it to Constance. Some notary guy was there too, but he barely looked up. Didn't even ask for ID. Didn't check a single thing, just stamped and walked away. I felt the heat start in my chest. I wasn't just erased. I was erased on paper, with fake ink and official stamps, legally invisible, conveniently removed. I couldn't breathe right for a few seconds. Then Ivy put a hand on my arm. "I still have the key to your storage unit, Maribel," she said. "I kept it just in case. Thought maybe one day you'd truly need it." I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. We left 10 minutes later. The drive was quiet, except for the wind outside and the rattling inside my chest. The unit was exactly as I'd left it, a low-cost rental in the industrial side of town. Steel door, dusty keypad, and that strange metallic scent that always reminded me of garage sales and forgotten history. Ivy unlocked it while I held my breath. Inside were the remnants of my past life, old holiday decorations, childhood keepsakes, boxes of paper I never had time to sort, and near the back, under a tarp, was the crate. I'd packed after Dad died. We pulled it out together. There it was, the original ledger, leather-bound, worn from use. Inside, years of my handwriting, purchase orders, tax filings, staff payment logs, signed by me, all of them. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the crate, half tucked between two old recipe binders, was a torn envelope. My name was scrawled in my father's handwriting. The flap was already open. I pulled out the letter slowly, careful not to tear the fragile paper. It was dated 2 weeks before his stroke. The ink had faded a little, but the message was clear. If anything ever feels wrong, go straight to Mr. Raleigh. He helped me protect what matters most. I left instructions, detailed. He knows exactly where everything is. Trust him, Maribel. I pressed the letter to my chest, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with clarity. He knew. He'd known they'd come for it, that they'd come for me, and he'd left a trail, in case I ever had to fight. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't being dramatic, like they always claimed. Ivy stood nearby, wiping her eyes. We didn't say much after that. Just packed the ledger, the letter, and the envelope into a cloth bag, and drove straight to downtown. Ivy looked up the number in the letter. Mr. Raleigh still practiced law out of a modest brick office, sandwiched between a dental clinic and a notary service. That irony wasn't lost on me. We walked in together, but I asked to speak to him alone. He looked to be in his 70s now. Silver hair, still sharp-eyed, with a firm handshake that made me feel steadier than I had in weeks. "You're Maribel," he said, not even asking. "I was wondering when you'd finally come here." He pulled a locked drawer open behind his desk, took out a thin black folder with my father Harold's initials embossed in gold. Inside were copies of the store's original ownership documents, before Constance had ever touched a single can of beans, before Sable ever learned to pronounce inventory. Then he flipped the page. It was a notarized letter from my father, dated years ago. "My daughter Maribel retains majority control of Hensley Market. If ownership is ever disputed, refer to the primary ledger in her hand. Her signature alone carries final say." I didn't blink. Mr. Raleigh leaned back in his chair and studied me. "You ready to assert your full legal rights?" he asked calmly, like he'd been waiting years to say those words. I took a long breath, let it settle in my lungs. Then I looked down at the napkin I'd tucked into my coat pocket, its edges worn soft. I folded it slowly, deliberately, and looked him straight in the eyes. "Yes," I said, "but I'm not just coming for the store anymore." He tilted his head, curious. "Oh? I'm coming for every single piece they tried to steal, and every single lie they fed people to cover it." He smiled then, not out of amusement, but recognition, like he'd seen this moment bloom in other women before. He tapped the folder with a pen. "Good, because the person who forged this," he held up the fraudulent transfer agreement, "is about to regret putting ink to paper forever." I nodded once. "Let's begin." While Mr. Raleigh dialed his first call, I sat in the corner of his office, scrolling through my phone's contacts with a strange, unfamiliar calm. There was only one name I knew I had to tap. I hadn't spoken to her since she graduated 2 years ago, but I remembered her quiet, nervous smile, and the way she'd always hesitate before hitting send on emails. Sable dictated to her. Naomi. I sent a simple message. "Hi, it's Maribel. Something serious has come up. Can we talk soon?" She replied before I could even put the phone down. "Yes. I thought this day might really come." 2 mornings later, I pulled into the Sacramento Public Library parking lot, just after 10 o'clock. I needed to print and organize every piece of documentation Mr. Raleigh requested, before our next step. I wasn't just building a case, I was preparing to take back the truth. The printer room was quiet. I logged into my old email, navigating to a folder I hadn't opened in nearly a year. My resume files. I'd updated it regularly when I still hoped to apply for non-profit boards, or maybe consult for another grocery chain. I downloaded the last version, hit print, and waited for the humming sound of the machine. But something caught my eye. An attachment in a public county filing that had popped up in a Google alert a week ago. I hadn't checked it until now. I clicked. My stomach twisted. It was my resume. Same layout, same bullet points. Even the phrasing I used when describing the outreach program I'd built after Dad's stroke. Only the name at the top wasn't mine. It was Sable's. They'd submitted it in a public funding proposal for a state grant, claiming she had founded and run Hensley Market's community initiatives. I stood motionless, my hand still resting on the printer lid. This wasn't just stealing credit. This was state fraud, with my name scrubbed clean, like I'd never been there, never existed. I didn't move until the librarian walked by and cleared her throat softly, reminding me where I was. The printed resume slid out. I folded it carefully, slid it into a folder, and walked back to my car like I was moving underwater. By noon, I was sitting across from Naomi at a small cafe in Curtis Park. She looked older, more confident than I remembered, but her eyes still held that hesitant edge, like she'd been waiting for someone to say, "It's okay to finally tell the truth now." If your own family ever stole your work, erased your name, and replaced it with someone else's, would you stay silent or fight back? Comment the number 1 below if you would never let them erase you. "Now listen, Maribel. I saved some of the emails," she said after our drinks arrived. "I did not mean to spy, Sable always made me feel like I was doing something wrong, even when I was just typing what she told me word for word." I nodded slowly. "You do not have to explain, Naomi. I know exactly what that pressure feels like." She slid her phone across the table. Screenshots. Dozens. Emails labeled draft from Maribel, delete after, and rewrite. Where my name, even attachments I remembered composing, with my style of phrasing and internal notes. "You knew they were using these?" I asked. She shrugged. "I thought maybe it was approved. Constance was always talking about how we need to clean up Maribel's legacy and make the store future-facing." I leaned back. Legacy. They were turning me into a ghost, one they could plagiarize freely and then bury. "Would you be willing to forward these?" I asked. Naomi nodded without hesitation. "I already have. I sent them all to a personal backup account. You can share them however you need." Later that afternoon, after I dropped Naomi off and thanked her quietly, I pulled into the parking lot behind Raleigh's office. From the front, the building looked like any other aging legal suite. Quiet brick, curtained windows, a sign that had faded from too many summers. But inside, change was moving. I handed him the screenshots and Sable's resume filing. He read through them, pausing only to raise an eyebrow. "This is damning evidence," he muttered. "We needed one more undeniable trigger, and this is it." We moved into the private conference room in the back. He'd scheduled a sit-down with a retired judge, neutral, well-respected, and still licensed to mediate disputes. His presence was meant to send a message. We're not just upset. We're organized. The mediator's voice was calm and measured as he reviewed the evidence. I sat silently through it all, letting the swirl of facts and forged documents speak for me. No crying, no raised voice. Only the weight of proof, and the absence of my name in places it should have been. As the meeting ended, Mr. Raleigh began drafting a formal packet. Not a lawsuit, not yet, but a detailed summary of everything we had, set to be sent to Constance and Sable's shared address. The tone was professional. The intent was crystal clear. "You have 24 hours to respond before we escalate this to court," it read. I added something of my own, a yellow post-it note, square and neat, on top of the folder. "For your records and for your conscience." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the sky dulled to lavender, I sat on the edge of my motel bed waiting. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "You really do not want to do this. You know how this family handles disobedience." I stared at it. then deleted it without replying. They were still using the same language. Disobedience. As if I'd ever signed up for their hierarchy. As if protecting what's mine made me a traitor. I powered the phone off and reached for the napkin folded neatly beside my bag. But the next message, the one they didn't expect, it was already written, drafted, scheduled, sent. Not just to Sable, but to the very funding board they'd filed the resume with. Because when you threaten someone who's already walked through fire, they don't flinch. They get strategic. By the time I stepped out of Mr. Raleigh's office, the sun had begun to dip behind the Sacramento skyline. I didn't go home. I didn't even head back to the motel. I just drove. Until the highway lights blurred into the kind of silence only someone betrayed could sit with comfortably. Then late Friday afternoon, Constance called. Her voice was as syrupy as it was sharp. "We're having dinner Sunday, just the family. I think it's time we talk this through properly, before you embarrass yourself any further." There it was again. That need to control the narrative. Even now, after everything I'd uncovered, she spoke like I was the one making a mess. I didn't respond right away. When I told Mr. Raleigh, he gave me a look that didn't need words. I beat him to it. "I'm going," I said firmly. He didn't argue, just leaned back in his chair and said, "Then go prepared, Maribel. Let them show you exactly who they are, one more time." I chose my clothes carefully that night. Nothing flashy, just a dark navy dress, and the old wristwatch my father Harold gave me the Christmas before his stroke. The leather band was worn and cracked, but the second hand still ticked. Quiet, defiant, just like I planned to be. The restaurant was one of those polished places in Folsom, with chandeliers and linen napkins that tried too hard. The kind of place Constance only booked when she wanted to prove something to outsiders, or shame someone within. When I arrived, the hostess paused, checked the reservation, and gestured vaguely to the back. "Your party's already seated," she said. "You'll be over this way." We weaved past elegant couples and glowing wine glasses, until we reached the last table near the hallway to the restrooms. Not a single centerpiece, not even a breadbasket. And there she was, Sable, seated at the head, right in the spot I used to take at every family occasion. Laughing, wearing that gold-wrapped dress Constance always claimed was too flashy for family settings, unless of course Sable wore it. I stood for half a second too long. A waiter hovered awkwardly. I cleared my throat and asked, "Is there another seat available? Perhaps somewhere closer to the center?" Before he could respond, Constance turned her head just slightly and snapped, "Do not be difficult, Maribel. It's just a seat. Just a simple seat." Like it wasn't the physical symbol of every choice she'd made. To erase me. To replace me. I smiled, not warmly. I sat. The evening unfolded in slow motion. Small talk. Forced laughter. Sable monopolizing the conversation, while Constance nodded in approval, like a stage mother finally seeing her understudy shine. Then came the toast. Sable stood up, raised her glass, a soft pink rosé that matched her lipstick, and said with a dramatic exhale, "I just want to thank Mom for everything she's done to support me, especially with the car," Sable said with a practiced smile. A round of polite applause broke out. Constance dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin and added, "Some people in this family rise bravely to the occasion. Some fall apart completely, but not you, Sable." I did not need to check to know every pair of eyes was looking at me, but I did need to check something else. I slid my phone just slightly under the tablecloth, opened the DMV portal, and typed in the plate number she'd just mentioned. It was mine, the same car I'd left behind when I walked out. According to the records, the title had been transferred 3 days after I left. Listed as a gift. My signature forged again. The breath didn't leave me in a gasp. It left in a quiet, steady exhale. I'd stopped expecting shame from any of them. As dessert menus arrived, Constance clinked her glass once more. "Some people make this family proud," she said loudly. "Others, They're content to let resentment sour every single room they enter. I rose before she could go further. I didn't knock over my chair. I didn't shout. Instead, I turned to the waiter who had been kind enough to refill my water 3 times without a single snide glance. "Thank you, sir. You have been the most respectful person at this table all night." He blinked, surprised, and nodded. Then I turned to Constance. "That was your last attempt," I said calmly. "The next thing you receive from me will be fully notarized." From my purse, I pulled a folded photograph. A black and white copy of the ledger page my father Harold had handwritten years ago, his neat cursive, my name clearly printed in the ownership column, Sable scribbled over in a different pen, an addition made much later. I placed it on the table between them and straightened my shoulders. This isn't about resentment, it's about undeniable reality. I didn't wait for their reaction. I turned to walk. Just as I reached the doorway, Sable hissed behind me, "You've always been jealous of me." I stopped, took a single step back, turned halfway, just enough to meet her eyes. "No," I said softly. "I just finally stopped protecting you from yourself at last." Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. The stars were sharp and quiet. The valet jogged over with a confused look, holding 2 sets of keys. "This one's yours," he said, handing me the familiar key fob I hadn't seen since the day I left. "But the system registered a backup, name matches. There's a legal update on file, said to give you both." I took them both, tucked them into my purse, and didn't say a word. That Sunday night, as the valet handed me those keys outside the restaurant, I didn't drive off right away. I sat there in the driver's seat with the door still ajar, letting the California night air settle on my skin. The scent of rosemary from the landscaping mixed with the faint perfume still clinging to my collar. Inside, they were still clinking glasses, toasting to Sable, to lies, to everything they thought they'd gotten away with. But I wasn't that quiet girl anymore, the one who always nodded, who always picked up the check, who always gave and never asked. Monday morning came too early, the kind that feels like you never really slept. I was standing in line at a local cafe when my debit card declined. I laughed quietly and tried it again. Declined. I pulled out my backup. Same result. By the time I got to my car, my phone lit up with 3 alerts from the bank. Fraud claim initiated, account frozen pending investigation, the shared account. My main account was locked. I didn't need to guess who was behind it, but I called the bank anyway. The voice on the other end was courteous but firm. "Yes, ma'am. We've received a fraud report filed by Constance. She claimed unauthorized use of joint funds." "She's the co-signer. I was the primary. That money is mine," I said evenly. "Well, until the review is complete, the funds will remain restricted." Restricted. As if I were the one who had lied. I ended the call and stared at the dashboard. My fingers were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel, my knuckles burned white. 10 minutes later, I was in Mr. Raleigh's office, standing just inside the threshold, holding the printed alerts in one hand. "They froze my money," I said, voice low. He didn't ask for details. He just pointed to the seat across from him and reached for his legal pad. "They're trying hard to suffocate you," he muttered, scanning the documents. "They won't," I said firmly. "I'll learn to breathe freely elsewhere." By the time I left his office, he'd filed an emergency financial injunction and had his assistant draft a formal rebuttal with supporting ownership records. But the day wasn't done with me yet. Around lunchtime, as I was walking back to my car after dropping documents at the bank, Ivy called. I picked up immediately. "Maribel, I'm so sorry," she said. "The police came by Mom's house early this morning." I stopped mid-step. "What exactly did they say?" "Constance filed a report. Claimed you broke in, that you stole things, and that you even threatened Sable." I felt my pulse in my throat. Before I could respond, another call buzzed through, this time from an unknown number. I switched over. "Hello, Ms. Hensley," a man said professionally. "This is Detective Miles Carraway with the Sacramento Police Department. We'd really appreciate it if you came in voluntarily to discuss a report filed by Constance Hensley. You are not under arrest. We just have some questions. I blinked into the sunlight. What time today, if possible? I hung up, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel again. It was becoming familiar, this stillness, right before the next punch. By 3:00 p.m., I was seated in a bland precinct interview room. Beige walls, a scuffed table, 2 metal chairs. Mr. Raleigh was beside me, expression unreadable. A young officer entered with a folder and sat across from us. He looked tired, or maybe just bored. He started with pleasantries, then shifted to vague phrasing. There's been an allegation of property interference. Suggestions of aggressive behavior. Mr. Raleigh reached calmly into his briefcase and slid a thick folder across the table. These are digital timestamps, email trails, financial ledgers, and security footage showing Maribel Hensley has not stepped foot in her mother's residence since... He flipped to the page. The evening of April 9th. Further, here are notarized documents indicating she was unlawfully removed from joint business ownership and that her personal vehicle was transferred via forged authorization. The officer flipped through the first few pages. His face changed. Well, we'll be reviewing this thoroughly, he mumbled. I'm sure you will, Mr. Raleigh said evenly, and I assume any malicious filing of a false report will also be reviewed very thoroughly. No one said much after that. By the time we stepped out into the hallway, dusk had started to stretch across the sky. The elevator pinged, and out walked Sable, right behind her Constance. She froze when she saw us. I didn't. Our eyes locked. You wanted me erased, I said, my voice as calm as the air between us. Now I've become truly indelible. Sable's eyes narrowed. You'll regret dragging this family through the mud. Mr. Raleigh didn't flinch. You should have thought of that before forging 3 different signatures. Or maybe that slipped your mind while shopping for a brand new Lexus. Neither of them spoke, but I saw it then, the first flicker of doubt in Constance's eyes. That night I sat in my rented apartment, a modest 2-bedroom walk-up with creaky floors and fading blinds, and stared at the ceiling. My phone pinged once. It was a message from the bank. Fraud claim invalidated. Access restored. Funds available. I scrolled down. There was an attachment, a screenshot of the DMV system, showing Sable's gifted car was now flagged as under legal review. I stared at it for a long time, then whispered into the dark, "We're not done." After everything, after the frozen accounts, the false report, the car title theft. You'd think I'd have gotten used to the quiet before another storm. But the message that came that Friday was different. It was slipped under my apartment door in an unmarked envelope. No return address, no signature, just a typed note on plain printer paper. You might want to show up at tonight's HOA meeting, 6:30 p.m., room B, Folsom Civic Hall. There was no threat in it, no warmth either, just information, pointed, deliberate, and whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. By 6:10, I was parked in front of the Civic Hall, the sky painted in streaks of pink and amber. The air had that early spring coolness that settles deep in your collarbones. I didn't rush, I didn't rehearse, I didn't even button my coat. I just walked in, quiet and unnoticed, and took the last seat in the back corner of room B. Up front, Sable was already mid-presentation, standing under a bright projector light like she owned the air in that room. She wore a pale blue blazer, hair pinned perfectly. She was speaking to about 24 residents, her voice chipper, sliding between phrases like neighborhood pride and community restoration. Behind her on the screen was a PowerPoint slide titled Beautification Fund, Proposed Sponsors and Partners. One bullet point stood out in bold. Hensley Heritage Market, Primary Donor and Founding Business Partner. I watched the room shift slightly. Some heads nodded. A few older neighbors I recognized from childhood were listening intently. When Sable asked if there were any questions, I raised my hand. Slowly. Intentionally. The room turned. Sable froze mid-blink. Yes, she said, voice tight and brittle. I stood up without smiling. Could you clarify for the group exactly when you joined the Hensley family business? Because I happen to have tax filings from 2017 through 2022 naming me as the sole contributor and manager. Gasps aren't common in community meetings, but that night I heard one. Sable stammered. She's just bitter because she walked away. I walked to the front, calm as rain. I placed a single manila folder on the table next to the microphone and said, "These are publicly filed records. Anyone here who wants to verify is absolutely welcome to." Then I left. No explanation, no defense, because sometimes the loudest statement is silence, backed by evidence. That night, I logged into my old Facebook account, the one I hadn't used since my father's funeral. My profile photo was still from 10 years ago. I updated nothing. I just posted one image, a scanned portion of my father's handwritten will. The caption beneath it read, "Legacy is not something you inherit easily. It's something you build with your own hands." It was up for less than 30 minutes before the first 100 comments rolled in. Old employees, former customers, childhood neighbors, people who remembered me at the register, who remembered the remodel after the fire, who remembered me before Sable even stepped foot inside that store. By midnight, screenshots had started circulating. Someone found Sable's social media reel from the week before, claiming she was the co-founder and youngest expansion manager in our family's legacy. They placed it side by side with archived footage from a 2019 news clip. Me, ribbon cutting the grocery store's remodel in my apron. And like that, her story began to crumble. By sunrise Saturday, 2 local sponsors had pulled their logos from her Instagram bio. The neighborhood Facebook group had removed her from admin status, and her upcoming talk at the local women's entrepreneur breakfast, cancelled. I didn't gloat. I didn't even log back in. I poured myself a cup of coffee, stared out the window at the quiet street, and let it all settle in. Until the phone rang. It was Constance. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. "You've made your point loud and clear enough already, Maribel. Come to the house alone." I pressed delete. 30 minutes later, a text came from Sable. "If you think this makes you look strong, you're completely delusional." I stared at it for a second, then typed slowly. "I'm not trying to look strong. I just finally stopped playing weak and silent." I hit send. The rest of the day was quiet, until early evening when Mr. Raleigh called. "They've requested a private negotiation," he said. "No lawyers on their side, just the 2 of them. I think they're scared, Maribel." I stood by my window, my reflection overlaid against the dusk outside. "Good," I said, and tapped the glass gently with my fingernail. "Let's make them sign this time." The following Thursday, I stood in front of a frosted glass door that read, "Raleigh and Lowell, LLP, Mediation Suite." The hallway smelled faintly of bergamot and money. I wore a black blouse, no makeup. My father's old watch ticking on my wrist like a drum I did not need to beat. My heels did not clack. They landed measured. Inside the room, Constance and Sable sat flanked by a young man in an ill-fitting suit, flipping nervously through a yellow legal pad. He barely looked old enough to rent a car, much less negotiate against a woman who had rebuilt a business from cinder block and canned beans. Mr. Raleigh was already standing. He did not speak, just gave a slight nod, like he'd been waiting for me to arrive, like a conductor signaling the final act. "Thank you all for being here," the mediator began, voice flat. "This is a confidential settlement session. All parties have agreed to keep discussions private unless stated otherwise. Now, let's begin." Sable's attorney launched in, reading from a typed proposal like it was some grand concession. A modest profit-sharing agreement, contingent on immediate cessation of Maribel's public statements, including social media posts and future claims to ownership. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no apology, non-disparagement clause required. Constance leaned back in her chair, like she'd just extended a favor to a beggar. Her eyes dared me to speak, but I did not. Instead, I opened the slim leather folder I'd brought and slid it across the table toward the mediator. He passed it to their side without a word, Inside, a set of notarized documents. Amendments to my father's will. Sable's hand paused mid-air as she reached for a water bottle. Her smile faltered. The attorney cleared his throat. We weren't aware there were updated terms. Mr. Raleigh leaned forward, smooth and calm. It appears the original will was amended 3 months before Mr. Harold Hensley's stroke. This version includes a clause granting exclusive rights of ownership, branding, and derivative property of Hensley Market and its affiliates to his daughter Maribel, provided she remained active in the business. Then he flipped the page. These filings, he continued, show consistent tax returns, supplier contracts, and employee payroll, all under Maribel's name. Meanwhile, neither Constance nor Sable filed any business activity forms in that entire period. Sable's fingers tightened sharply around her pen. Which means, Mr. Raleigh added, Ms. Sable's use of that branding in community presentations, sponsorship applications, and social media constitutes intellectual property infringement. A silence so dense filled the room you could have folded it. Constance broke first. You manipulated your father when he was weak. He did not even know what he was signing. I turned to her slowly. Is that how you justify absolutely everything, Constance? That people are always too weak or far too stupid to challenge you? She opened her mouth again, but I reached into my bag and pulled out one more item. An envelope, torn slightly at the edge, my father's handwriting on the front. I passed it to the mediator, who read it silently before nodding and handing it over. The note was short, unmistakably his. To my daughter, thank you for protecting the heart of what we built. I trust you'll always do what's right, no matter who dares to stand in your way. Sable's carefully powdered face drained of color. She looked suddenly very small in her tailored jacket. I stood slowly, my chair not even creaking. Here are my terms, I said clearly. You'll sign over full control of the business name, storefront, and all related marketing materials. You'll retract your claims, both online and in writing, and you will never contact me again. Not for birthdays, funerals, or any so-called second chances. Constance's lawyer tried to interject. Mr. Raleigh cut him off with one raised palm. If not, I added firmly, we move forward with civil litigation, criminal fraud investigation, and a press release to every single outlet in the Tri-County area. The young lawyer paled. Sable reached for her water and spilled half of it across the table. I didn't flinch. 30 minutes later, they signed. I took the final copy in hand and, without a smile, added one last line in blue ink beneath my name. The gift you demanded was never yours to begin with. As I left the room, I didn't look back. Because this wasn't revenge. This was release. 3 months later, I no longer woke up to silence, but to the slow warmth of sunlight pressing through sheer curtains. My apartment was modest. 2 rooms, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in. But it was mine. There was no old clock ticking behind me, no familiar footsteps in the hallway. No one else deciding what counted as home, just me. A chipped coffee grinder I'd found at a yard sale, and the scent of dark roast rising from the stovetop. I poured my coffee into a new ceramic mug. Clean, simple. Not the floral porcelain cup Constance used to insist I drink from, the one she once called proper. I didn't take anything from that house, not even memories. I was speaking later that morning, nothing fancy, just a local women's event at the library downtown. A quiet gathering focused on financial independence, estrangement, and the work of rebuilding a life after betrayal. They'd asked me to share my story, and I would. But not all of it. On my way out the door, keys in hand, I stopped. A small box sat quietly on the welcome mat. No return address, no note. I carried it in and opened the lid with a careful, steady motion. Inside sat the ceramic soup bowl. The same one from that morning. The one she had hurled at me without flinching. It had been washed, polished almost reverently, packed. I held it for a moment, then set it on the bookshelf between two travel journals I hadn't touched in years, not out of sentiment, not out of guilt, just acknowledgement, a relic, not a wound. That afternoon, standing on the low stage inside the library's main hall, I didn't read from prepared notes. I didn't need them. "I'm not here to expose anyone," I said to the group of women, their eyes quietly locked on mine. "This isn't about blame. This is about what it truly means to lose your place and still somehow find your footing again." I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I spoke about the erosion. How family can empty you little by little until you forget where you begin and where they end. I talked about the illusion of obligation, about how silence isn't peace, about how pretending to be okay, just to keep the room from burning, only makes the fire harder to put out later. One woman near the back wiped her cheek and whispered to the person beside her, "That was my story too." After the event, someone pressed my hand in theirs. Someone else asked quietly for the name of my lawyer, and I offered them both my email without hesitation. That night, back in my apartment, I sat down at my small desk, the one I had thrifted for $40 and sanded myself, and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank post window for a long time, listening to the hum of the fridge in the background, then finally typed, "Forgiveness is not owed, silence is not consent, and sometimes love is simply letting go before it destroys you completely." I did not tag anyone. I did not link the store, the people, or the pain. I just posted it. Within hours, the comments started to pour in, not from faceless strangers, but from survivors. People who had endured something that echoed my own. One comment simply said, "You helped me leave." Another read, "I thought I was alone until I heard this." I leaned back in my chair and let the words sink in. For the first time in years, I did not feel erased. 2 days later, while grabbing paper towels at the grocery store, I turned the corner near aisle 3, and there she was, Constance. She was standing in front of the frozen vegetables, staring at a bag of peas like it might open and tell her what to do. She looked older, not weaker, not defeated, just worn down, tired in a way makeup could never cover. She turned and caught my eye. She did not speak, and neither did I. But she did not look through me this time either. Her gaze met mine, not with malice, not even with regret, but with something closer to truth, quiet and heavy. I nodded, barely, and she blinked once, then turned back to the peas. That was it. Some wars end with treaties. Others end when you finally stop fighting altogether. That night I lit a single candle and sat back at my desk. On my screen was a document titled, Chapter 1, The Day I Said No. The cursor blinked at me steadily, patient. I did not feel bitter. I did not feel triumphant. I simply felt free. Because sometimes the story you have waited your whole life to tell does not begin with applause or validation. It begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to hand you the pen. And maybe that is the quiet truth I had been chasing all along. That freedom is not loud. It is steady. It is waking up in your own space, brewing your own coffee, deciding that peace is not something given, but something you claim. This is not just my story. It might be yours too. If you have ever felt erased, overlooked, or made to doubt your worth, I hope you know you are not alone. I hope you know you can reclaim your own narrative, no matter how long it takes. Share your thoughts, your feelings, or even your own story in the comments. I would love to listen and learn from you. If this story touched something in you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss the next story we bring to you. Drop a comment with the words, "Choose your freedom," at the end of this video if you believe in reclaiming your voice, your life, and your worth. Thank you for staying with me until the end. This was one story among many, and I cannot wait to meet you again in the next video. Until then, take care of yourself, and remember, you are stronger than you think.